The daily task of a very special kind of miller. Johannes Vollmer opens the roof shutters of his paper mill. In the mill's loft, handmade paper is hung up to dry, each sheet a work of art. Kurt and Hildegard Vollmer lived and worked here for many years before handing everything over to their son. But they still look after the mill's superb garden, even today. And the next generation is already making itself useful. The paper mill has stood for over 200 years in Homburg am Main, a small town west of Würzburg. The mill has had an eventful history. First built in 1729, at its original location, the water ran out, so the mill was dismantled, beam for beam and brick for brick, and reconstructed in Homburg in 1807. But that wasn't the end of its troubles, because the mill almost failed to survive the 20th century.
We started renovating in 2 rooms. But after 3 years, you just wouldn't have known. There was so much left to do. I was all for pulling it down.
And what would that have achieved?
That was just a threat to stir the Antiquities and Monuments Office into action.
Is he now glad the mill wasn't demolished?
Definitely. Something would be missing. After all, it's been here for over 200 years.
What did the locals think of all the renovation work?
A lot of people in the village were envious because of the amount of money invested, but not anymore. They've noticed that many visitors come to Homburg because of the mill. The catering trade does very well out of it. So resistance to the mill isn't like it used to be. In the past, though, people did complain about our ramshackle building getting a free facelift.
With the help of the Bavarian State Antiquities and Monuments Office and the district of Lower Franconia, the Homburg paper mill was saved. A unique cultural asset was thus preserved at its location and didn't even need to be moved to an open-air museum, for instance. Restoring the building and its equipment cost over €1 million. Perfect ammunition, so to speak, for the project's critics. But through a hereditary lease, the renovated mill will belong to the state for 45 years. Johannes Vollmer has set up a new workshop in the old stable building. Depending on customer requirements, the Homburg manufactory produces paper from cotton, flax, hemp or rags. First of all, the raw material is shredded and steeped. The fibres are then placed in a wooden tub to be stirred into a pulp with water, size and sometimes dye. Johannes Vollmer is a 5th-generation papermaker. He works with sieves which even his ancestors once used. What kind of skills does papermaking require?
Well, first of all, you need inner balance. You're working with your hands, and you've got to hold the sieve as horizontal as possible. So good centering is really important to ensure an acceptable result.
In an operation known as couching, the watery pulp is carefully pressed onto a felt. What material is the mold made from?
It's a fairly old mold because it was even used by my grandfather. The frame is made of oak and the supporting strut of larch. I assume that the material is copper gauze. The letters are probably lead, stitched on with copper wire.
Homburg has the only operational paper mill in Bavaria. Up until 1975, cardboard for file covers was also manufactured here. The best client was the tax office. Production in the machine room was powered by a huge overshot water wheel. Today, this part of the mill is a museum. It's really loud in here, and it was probably damp too when there was water flowing through.
Definitely. You no longer had to put your hands in the water. But because it was cold, it made things pretty damp. Even on hot summer days, you still needed to wear a jacket.
How long did he work here?
I grew up here. After all, we lived and worked under one roof. So I experienced and also learnt all the operations.
Miterlebt und auch mitgeholfen bis 75, ne?
That was the steeping drum. The paper was sorted according to color, put in the drum and water added. The drum rotated during the day. When it was opened, the paper was mushy and lumpy. It was then shoveled out of the steeping drum and into the pan mill to be ground again. From the pan mill, the material went into the defibration machine. Then the dye and the size were added.
Work ended here in 1975. Since then, nothing has been changed. However, for conservational reasons, water no longer flows to the machines. The handmade paper is couched, pressed, dried and smoothed. At one time, 2,000 sheets a day were produced here. Today, that figure has fallen to around 100. The Homburg paper mill is an industrial monument. Exposed after centuries, the artistic timber framework gives no indication of how tough working in a mill used to be. It meant climbing the steep stairs from the machine cellar to the drying loft countless times a day, carrying heavy, wet sheets of paper and cardboard.
This is the room where the paper was smoothed and pressed. In the evening, the smoothed sheets were counted. Then the next 100 sheets were placed in the machine, and so on. The two presses are the oldest part of the mill. They date back to the time when everything was done by hand.
How was the pressing done?
This wooden pole was inserted at the top and pulled by hand. Tightening was then done with a winch. The pole weighs 25 kilograms. And paper, whether it's wet or dry, is heavy. In the past, we had to carry everything up to the loft and then take it back down. That was hard work.
In contrast to industrial production, making paper by hand calls for a lot of composure and instinctive feeling. If his great-great-great-grandfather were looking over his shoulder, would he be happy with Johannes's work?
I think so. Mills were always handed down from one generation to the next. And I'm still doing this work voluntarily.
Da ich das dann auch freiwillig mache vielleicht.
So I'm certain he would be pleased to see someone again doing the job the way he used to.
Der das so macht, wie er wohl.
War das nicht eine
Did
gewisse
Johannes also feel a certain commitment to take over the mill?
weiterzuführen?
Das war kein Muss von der Familie
It
oder
wasn't like the family forced me to or something. I was personally interested in reviving something to prevent it being
damit
lost.
es einfach auch nicht verloren geht.
The Homburg paper mill is both a workshop and a museum, something unique, just like every handmade sheet.